What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Playbook Sports Podcast, where instead of talking about the players today and talking about mock drafts and everything like that, let's talk about the people that are going to be tasked with developing these players. Let's talk about the new coaches that have been hired to be head coaches in the NFL this offseason, and let's grade them just based off of initial thought, feelings about them. I'm going to talk about all 7 of these guys and just give them a grade. Again, maybe I look stupid in a year when one guy who I don't think was a great hiring pans out and vice versa. So we'll see what happens, but just based off of initial reaction to these and looking at some of their staff moves, I'm going to give you guys a grade. So we're going to start at the top with, I think, there are 2 A grades. The first A grade I handed out was to Mike Vrabel, who was hired to be the new head coach of the New England Patriots. Patriots gave up on Gerard Mayo after 1 year as head coach, and they did not seem like that was something they wanted to do, but I think he was just very different than Bill Belichick, and they're like, no, we want someone like Bill Belichick, and Mike Vrabel is as close as you can get to Bill Belichick without actually getting that guy back. Stylistically, runs a very similar defense. His demeanor, a very similar guy, and he brings back stability. He had really good stability built up in Tennessee. The Tennessee team was under Mike Vrabel. Strong defense, strong teams. They were just strong teams. I think New England decided, you know what, we need a real adult in the room, a guy that's been there, done that, and that wasn't Gerard Mayo. The Patriots got used to winning. There's no way around that. And then a couple years now where they haven't done a whole lot of winning, and they're like, okay, let's get a coach in here who's actually been a winner for us, or in the NFL as a head coach. I mean, the guy took Ryan Tannehill to an AFC title game. That's impressive by itself. Coming back with him, he brings back Josh McDaniels, which will be interesting to see because Josh McDaniels was great as an offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, but he also had Tom Brady all that time. And then he would leave and was terrible. He could not cut it as a head coach anywhere else. Was that because of him? Was that because he didn't have Tom Brady? So we'll find out a lot about Josh McDaniels. Is he just a coordinator? Because there are guys like that who are just good coordinators, not good head coaches. Will Josh McDaniels find out, or will we find out about Josh McDaniels and what he is as a coordinator without Tom Brady? It'll be really interesting to see because he's been tasked with developing quarterback Drake May, who's going into his second year. They are going to be wanting to see a big step in his development. Is Josh McDaniels the guy? I understand Vrabel brought him in for the familiarity with the organization. He's seen his work firsthand, so I can respect that. And I'm sure they've already got a pretty good working relationship. At the end of the day, I really like the hiring. Vrabel's going to be running the defense. Josh McDaniels will be running the offense. And we'll see what the Patriots can do next year, but I think that they absolutely hit a home run with this pick of head coach, and they have a ton of money in free agency, over $120 million in cap space, so Vrabel can kind of mold this team into what he wants. So they get an A for me. Next coach I want to talk about, the only other A grade I have is the Chicago Bears hiring Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. I personally don't think the Bears could have done any better in this head coaching cycle or even last year's head coaching cycle. This was always the guy. This was always the guy for the Bears, and he immediately brings hope to Chicago. Chicago fans are seeing headlines of offense. Finally, we're going to have some offense. This past year was a real disappointment under Shane Waldron and Matt Eberflus, and Ben Johnson is just going to bring electricity to that place. Now he is a huge task. Get Caleb Williams to play like the generational type of prospect people thought he was. Get him to play like the number 1 pick in the draft. He's got the weapons. He's got to build that offensive line. We'll see them probably do that through free agency in the draft. But I'm a huge fan of Ben Johnson. The offensive design he did, and he called his own plays in Detroit too, which I absolutely love. This isn't an offensive coordinator that just kind of built the offense and then let someone else call it. No, he called it himself, and he's going to continue to call it himself. That's kind of a big thing for me too because he hired Declan Doyle as the offensive coordinator, who's super young, like low 30s. And it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to me because he's not going to do a whole lot. He's going to be an assistant, but he's not going to call the offense. He's not going to build the offense. This is Ben Johnson's offense, and I love that. And then he made a great hiring in Dennis Allen as his defensive coordinator. You've got head coaching experience right off the bat. He's already got somebody in the room who he can lean on for support and ask questions to, like, okay, how did you handle this situation? How did you handle this situation? Dennis Allen has been there and done that. It wasn't great in New Orleans, but New Orleans hasn't been great in some time, so I don't blame him for that. Their defense was always solid, and he is a good defensive coordinator. I think that you need that as a young head coach who's never had head coaching experience before. You should always have someone in the room that does have that head coach experience. So I think Ben Johnson's filling out his staff really well, And if you're a Bears fan, you should be pretty excited because you finally got rid of Eberflus and you brought in somebody who can actually do the damn thing. Next coach I want to talk about, and I'm going in order of grades. So if you haven't heard your coach's name yet, it's going to be lower than the previous one, if that makes sense. Next up, I want to talk about Jaguars hiring Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. I gave him a B-. I give them a B- for this hiring. Thought about a B, and then I saw the clip of him saying Duval weird, and I'm like, no, B-. For that alone, B-. And I don't love that he kind of screwed over Tampa Bay, right? He went and interviewed for Jacksonville. They weren't going to fire the GM. And then he goes back to Tampa Bay and signs the deal to become the highest paid coordinator in the NFL. They were paying him all sorts of money. And then the Jags are like, we will fire a general manager for you. And he's like, okay, I'm going to sneak back over there, ignore all of Todd Bowles' calls, and I'm going to take this job. I don't like that. It's kind of shady. I'm not going to hold that against the Jaguars for hiring him, so they still get the B- grade for it. And he's going to have a pretty tall task himself. He's also got a quarterback that he needs to continue to develop. Trevor Lawrence was being talked about as a top 5 guy in the NFL after really one good year and hasn't been the same. Is his body failing him? Possibly. But Trevor Lawrence has elite talent and can be an elite quarterback. You just have to get it out of him. Liam Cohen comes from the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan tree, which does breed good offensive minds. However, I think he did his best work when he got out on his own and took over play calling duties in Tampa Bay. Yeah, he was fine as the Rams offensive coordinator. You aren't calling plays. It's like being Kyle Shanahan's offensive coordinator. It's not your offense. You're not calling the plays. You're just learning, and you're just an assistant there to help. But he gets into Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield has the best year of his career. And that's huge. If he can get that level of play from Trevor Lawrence and the weapons that they've got out there too, they could be really good, and it could be a huge success of a hiring. This one has boom or bust potential written all over it. This is either going to be a slam dunk, Jaguars win 11 games next year and Trevor Lawrence looks like an all-pro, or the offense is stagnant, Trevor Lawrence doesn't play very well or even gets hurt, which wouldn't be Cohen's fault, or they go 5-11 or 5-12. This is either going to be a slam dunk or just a complete whiff. I'm going to give him a B-. I think it's more likely to be a slam dunk than a whiff. Next coach that I want to talk about is the Las Vegas Raiders hiring of Pete Carroll. I don't hate the hiring. I don't hate Pete Carroll. I give this grade a C. Bang on average. Smack dab in the middle is the fourth one I'm talking about too. So pretty average. But here's the perspective I'm looking at it from where I don't like it. The question you need to ask yourself is how long do we think it will take the Raiders to become a team that can compete for the AFC West and the AFC and compete for a Super Bowl? And if your answer is longer than 2 years, then why did you bring in Pete Carroll? Guys, he's 73 years old. Still looks good for 73. I'll give it to him. But Father Time is undefeated. Ask anybody. And if you think it's going to take longer than 2 years for them to have a roster capable of winning, what are we doing? What's the plan here? What's the long-term goal? His 5-year plan is stay alive. He's 73 years old. He has to turn them around quickly, and he has to be able to relate to guys who are 50-plus years younger than him. So can he do that? I don't know. I trust him as a coach. I think he's a good coach. I just don't know if the talent is there. This seems like a spot where you would get almost like a Band-Aid coach. I would have kept Antonio Pierce for another year. I don't think Pete Carroll was going to be hired anywhere else, most likely. I would have hung on to Antonio Pierce for one more year, drafted, and then gone with Pete Carroll next year because you'd be closer to contention. I don't know. I don't know how you do it. I just think that Pete Carroll should probably hang him up when you're at 73 years old. What more do you have to prove, man? He's going to try and build it into the Legion of Boom again and build that defense that he had out in Seattle, and I just don't see that happening right away. He's got a high-paid quarterback, a team that's missing just a lot. So I give it a C because I think Pete Carroll's a good coach. I just don't love the fit that much. Next coach I want to talk about here is the New York Jets hiring of defensive coordinator from Detroit, Aaron Glenn. I give this one a C as well. I was teetering on a C+. I could be talked into a C+. But we're going to go C for this one because this just feels like deja vu. Did we not just do this a few years ago with Robert Saleh, defensive-minded head coach being brought in, no quarterback, that you still have to figure that out, and you better hope you figure it out because we're going to fire you anyways. And then, Rodgers is out officially, so Glenn is going into a place. He doesn't have a quarterback. Tyrod Taylor at 34? No. You can't really draft one this year unless you do it in the second or third round, and then you're hoping that they develop. You've got a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball, but that talent has been there for 3 years, and it hasn't amounted to much. Even with Aaron Rodgers playing decent football last year, you won 5 games, man. 5 games. That defensive talent, guys like DJ Reed is going to be gone. He's a free agent. Jermaine Johnson is going to be expecting to get paid soon. Sauce Gardner is going to need to be getting to be paid soon. You just have kind of wasted the prime of this defense when it was cheap, and now it's going to be a little bit more costly. So you're going to need Glenn to get the most out of them right away, and without a quarterback on roster, that is hard to do. To be fair to Aaron Glenn, I love that he brought in Steve Wilks to be his defensive coordinator. He's not going to call the defense. It's going to be Aaron Glenn, but he is another guy that's had head coaching experience, had some decent success in the NFL, and he's someone that Aaron Glenn can lean on for knowledge and just continue to learn as much as he can from Steve Wilks, who's only 55 years old, so he'd be a good guy to step up if needed. I don't love having Tanner Engstrand as the offensive coordinator. I don't like that because it's a guy that hasn't done it before. He's the first-time offensive coordinator. Why are we bringing in a first-time offensive coordinator to work with a brand new first-time head coach who's a defensive head coach, and you're going to trust this guy to build your offense and figure out the quarterback situation that hasn't been figured out in New York in who knows how long? I just don't love that. I feel like they could have used a steadier hand on the wheel on the offensive side. So I'm going to go with a C, and if he brought in a better OC, I would probably bump this up a little bit. Next up, we'll talk about the New Orleans Saints bringing in offensive coordinator Kellen Moore from Philadelphia. This one is kind of similar to Pete Carroll. Like, the roster kind of sucks, and you've got a lot of things you've got to kind of figure out here. And I misspoke earlier when I said the Raiders have an expensive quarterback. They don't. I was thinking about the Saints. But Kellen Moore doesn't have any head coaching experience at all. He's walking into a place where their quarterback is overpaid, and the roster's just not that great, and also they're like $70 million over the cap every single year. Tough situation. And you could say Kellen Moore did really well in Philadelphia. It's like, yeah, his offense was hand the ball to Saquon Barkley. That was the offense this year. And just ask Jalen Hurts not to turn the ball over and hit the easy throws. This was not a complicated offense. This was not a good-looking offense. This was ugly. This was a run the ball down their throats because we have Saquon Barkley. You don't have Philadelphia's offensive line. You don't have Saquon Barkley. You have an aging Alvin Kamara. This team was 14th in the league in rushing last year. They've got to do something different, and I don't know how they can because they don't have any cap space. His last year in LA with the Chargers was uninspiring with Justin Herbert and the weapons that were still there. That team finished with the 5th overall pick, so they were pretty terrible. I just don't love the fit. This is a tough first gig to be a head coach. This is a really tough first gig for him. So I'm going to give them a C-. And last but not least, Colin, look away. Cowboys hiring offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer to be their new head coach. I give this a D+. I've seen much worse grades than this one from people, but I'm going to go with a D+ here. The guy's got no head coaching experience, and he has been an offensive coordinator at several different places, but if you look at where all of those places were, it's not been good. In 2001, he was the they were the Washington Redskins at that time. Don't cancel me. He was their quarterbacks coach. They were the 28th ranked offense. From 2002 to 2005, he was the quarterbacks coach in San Diego, and those were the worst years of Drew Brees' career. He was the New York Jets offensive coordinator from 2006 to 2011, where they had the best defense in the league, and the offense could not get over the hump for them. St. Louis Rams offensive coordinator. They were in the bottom third of the league in offense all of those years. Georgia offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. They were the 85th ranked team in offense through that year. Colts quarterback coach, 30th in offense in that season. Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator. Their offense was terrible from 2018 to 2020. It was no good. Russell Wilson was not very good at all those years. The offense really struggled. And then the Jaguars passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach, they were 32nd in offense that year. 32nd in just widespread dysfunction. So everywhere he's been, it has struggled. And then he's been in Dallas since as the offensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy was calling the plays, not him. I cannot help but feel like the Cowboys thought they were going to keep Mike McCarthy and then change their mind, so they let him go. And then all of the good coaches were already spoken for. And they're like, crap, what do we do? We'll just promote him because we know him. And Jerry just wants to continue to be in charge. This is another guy that Jerry can completely control, because who is going to hire Brian Schottenheimer to be their head coach other than the Dallas Cowboys? Nobody. This is his only shot, and he knows that. So he is going to do whatever Jerry wants. The Cowboys were never going to hire a coach with any sort of backbone, because if they did that, they can't. You can't do that because Jerry Jones wouldn't allow it. He will not have it anymore. He had it with Jimmy Johnson. He fired him. He will not have a coach with backbone because they will push back on what he wants, and he's not about that. He wants to be in control. And that is a terrible thing for the Cowboys, man. And then I look at his staff. Maybe there's some things to be saved for his staff, right? He's going to be running the offense. The defensive side of the ball, he brings in Matt Eberflus, who was a terrible head coach in Chicago. Terrible head coach. That's your only head coaching experience on this entire staff, by the way, is Matt Eberflus. It's like, well, we may as well not even have head coaching experience. That hardly counts. Now, Eberflus did have good defenses. I will give him that. The defense for Chicago, especially 2023-24 season, the defense was really solid when they got the right pieces there. Dallas will have to get the right pieces there. I would love to see them trade for Myles Garrett, although they're up against the cap because they've got to pay, Dak like $80 million in cap this next year. So they've got to figure that out. It's a tough spot for Schottenheimer, but it was his only option, no question. It was the only job that he could have gotten to be a head coach. So I'm going to give them a D+ and hope that they prove me wrong. So that is all I've got for you guys on the offseason grades of these new head coaches. Let me know if you guys agree, disagree, or if you have any thoughts on any of these grades that I gave them. I feel like I was pretty reasonable with these, a couple of A's, but then mostly middling grades here. There was just only 2 real good ones where I was like, yes, that is an awesome fit. And the other ones was like, maybe this works. I don't know. And then Schottenheimer, I just feel like doesn't have a shot. Doesn't have a Schottenheimer. So that's all I've got for you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one.